The clouds over the valley looked like they had been hammered into place, thick, bruised masses that let in only slivers of gray light. The wind swept cold across the ridges, carrying with it the low hum of something unnatural, engines heavy and resonant, cutting through the quiet like a pulse. Sergeant Elias Kane lay face down in the mud, his cheek pressed to the damp ground, one eye fixed behind the glass of his scope. The scent of wet earth filled his lungs, grounding him in the here and now, but his mind was on the horizon, where shapes moved within the mist. Through the lens, the distant blur resolved into the colossal silhouettes of landing craft. They descended in perfect formation, each one a slab of alien engineering etched with the silver and black insignia of the galactic armies. Lightning flashed beyond the mountains, momentarily painting their hulls in harsh white before darkness swallowed them again. Hydraulic struts unfolded with insect precision, sinking deep into the saturated soil. The valley floor trembled under the weight of their arrival. Kane's rifle rested in the crook of his shoulder, its barrel wrapped in strips of torn burlap and synthetic thread, each strand soaked and darkened until it blended with the hillside. His ghillie suit was a patchwork of grass, dirt, and moss, clinging to him like a second skin. It was crude compared to the smooth, gleaming armor of the invaders, but crude was not the same as ineffective. The aliens, in their arrogance, didn't understand that. They emerged in ranks, hundreds at a time, their segmented armor gleaming wet in the thin daylight. Helmets shaped like angular masks hid their features, but Kane had seen enough through past encounters to know their eyes glowed faintly beneath those visors, sharp and cold. Some carried rifles with the weightless ease of predators. Others hauled equipment toward the center of the landing zone. Above them, drones flitted like wasps, scanning the terrain in precise sweeps. In Kane's earpiece, a burst of static preceded the clipped voice of Captain Dre, his field controller. Long shot 1, confirm visual. Visual confirmed, Kane murmured. Multiple platoons establishing base. Heavy gear incoming. Hold position. Identify forward command before engaging. Kane acknowledged without hesitation, letting the channel go quiet. He was patient. Patience was survival. A meter to his left, Corporal Juno Vance lay half-submerged in a shallow depression, her small optic glowing faintly under a cover of cloth. She moved sparingly, her hands making the smallest adjustments to her scanning slate. Younger than Kane by nearly 10 years, she had the same stillness that all good spotters learned, body locked, breath measured, mind fixed. Command elements coming out of the central carrier, she whispered. Kane shifted the scope's focus. A taller, broader figure stepped from the largest of the craft, flanked by officers whose silver-plated armor gleamed even in the muted light. Their rifles were heavier, their bearing imperious. The central figure gestured toward a spot on the valley floor where a portable command hub was already unfolding from its transport case. The surrounding soldiers spread in an outward arc, establishing a perimeter. The alien commander's armor was etched with crimson patterns, sharp and deliberate, each one telling some story Kane would never know. His helmet swept left and right, not in frantic search, but with the calm of someone surveying property they already considered theirs. Over the comm intercept, the translator caught a fragment of the commander's speech. These humans hide behind rags and shadows. Their camouflage is a joke. Kane's jaw tightened, but he didn't reply. Vance's mouth twitched in a humorless smirk. Guess they've never met a joke that shoots back. The rain began to fall, light at first, then steadier, flattening the sound of the landing zone's activity. Kane watched as crates of supplies were stacked with mechanical efficiency. Weapons platforms erected in arcs that covered the basin. The drones adjusted their routes to account for the weather, their lights cutting pale cones through the mist. Hours passed in silence. Patrols fanned out across the valley floor, but avoided the ridges. Kane and Vance stayed locked in position, noting every shift in formation, every vulnerability that emerged. The rain slicked the hillside, soaking into Kane's gloves until his fingers felt like ice, but discomfort was irrelevant. Near dusk, the commander reappeared, this time holding something aloft. Through the scope, Kane recognized it, a shredded human ghillie suit, its threads torn and caked in mud. The alien's voice carried across the valley, translated in Kane's ear. This is their invisibility. This is the cloth they think will save them. Laughter rippled through the alien ranks, a harsh, metallic sound that echoed against the valley walls. The commander flung the suit aside, its limp form hitting the mud with a wet slap. Vance's hands tightened around her slate. That belonged to someone. They'll regret touching it, Kane said, his voice level. The alien officers conferred briefly, their gestures sharp and impatient. More drones lifted into the air, their hum rising above the rain's steady rhythm. The base below was a living thing now, its structures glowing with cold, blue-white light, the perimeter tight, every entry point guarded. Kane adjusted his scope one final time for the day, tracking the commander's movements until he disappeared back into the hub. His mind filed away every detail, the distance from cover to the command hub, the pattern of the guard rotations, the blind spots in the drone's sweep. When the sky finally darkened, the valley became a patchwork of light and shadow. The alien stronghold glowed against the dark hills, but beyond that circle of brilliance was nothing but mist and silence. Kane and Vance remained invisible, two shadows within the earth itself. "We wait," Kane murmured. Vance nodded, her gaze fixed on the basin below. Far beneath them, the alien commander laughed again, unaware of the crosshairs that had already marked him. In that sound, Kane heard the arrogance that had destroyed 100 worlds, and the promise that on this one, it would cost them dearly. Rain still clung to the valley like a shroud when dawn bled into the sky. The alien base below had transformed overnight. New barricades, sentry drones gliding in lazy arcs above the perimeter, and thick cables running from the command hub to the weapons platforms. The galactic armies moved with the same relentless order, their armor gleaming in the weak daylight, their every motion rehearsed and precise. Yet their discipline had edges Kane could see fraying. Even from this distance, he caught the slight hesitations of soldiers scanning the hillsides, the extra moments spent glancing into the mist. The unknown gnawed at them. Kane shifted his weight in the mud, keeping his movements deliberate and slow. Every joint in his body felt locked in place after the long night, but stiffness was an old enemy and easily ignored. His rifle lay before him, scope lens dimmed with a filter to avoid catching stray light. Beside him, Vance adjusted her slate, the soft glow hidden beneath a scrap of cloth. She had already mapped the morning patrols and marked two patterns that broke the perfect symmetry of the alien movements. "They're replacing the northern sentry every 22 minutes, she murmured. "Gaps about 30 seconds before the replacement locks in." Kane's eyes didn't leave his scope. And the western side, blind spot between the towers. Fog rolls in heavier there. They're extending the sweep, but the sensors lag. Information was ammunition, and Vance had learned to collect it with the same precision Kane reserved for his shots. They had no luxury for wasted words. The alien commander from the day before emerged from the command hub again, flanked by officers in silvered armor. They moved toward a formation of soldiers assembled in tight ranks. The commander's voice carried over the comm intercept, the translator giving Kane the clipped interpretation. "Our enemies cling to dirt and shadows. They will be found, and they will be erased." Laughter followed, not as loud as yesterday, but still certain. Kane let the words slide past him. Words weren't the battlefield. Distance, timing, and patience were. He shifted his scope toward the western blind spot Vance had noted. A small patrol moved through, 3 soldiers in matte gray armor, scanning with shoulder-mounted lights. They walked with the same carelessness as those who believed technology answered every question. "Patrol west," Vance whispered. Kane made no sound. He tracked their movement until they passed between 2 jagged boulders at the edge of the valley floor. The fog swallowed them for an instant. His crosshairs settled on the gap between the leader's helmet and shoulder plate. Breath slowed, heart steady, pressure on the trigger. The rifle cracked, a sharp, clean sound that vanished almost instantly into the rolling echo of the valley walls. Through the scope, Kane watched the alien drop without a sound. Armor splintered where the round found its way in. The 2 others froze, heads snapping toward the sound's origin, rifles raised. They fired into the fog, plasma bolts searing the air. Kane shifted slightly, chambering the next round, and caught the second soldier as he turned toward the fallen comrade. Another precise strike, another body down. The third broke into a sprint for cover, his armor plates glinting faintly. Kane led him by a fraction and sent the shot. The soldier pitched forward, motionless. Vance was already marking the fallen positions. 3 down. No alarm yet. Too far from the center to be noticed right away, Kane said. Their sensors will read it as a calm dropout for a few seconds. Below, the patrol routes began to shift. Kane could see figures moving to investigate, but without a clear understanding of where the threat came from, they spread thin. A pair of drones lifted from the base, humming as they scanned the air. Their optics flared red as they passed overhead, but Kane lay utterly still, mud cooling his skin beneath the suit. The drones moved on, returning to their original patterns. The rain began again, thicker now, turning the basin into a churned expanse of dark water and clay. Alien boots sank deeper with every step, slowing their response. Kane and Vance used the cover to reposition slightly along the hillside, angling for a better view of the command hub. Every inch mattered. Visibility, line of sight, and the subtle shift in elevation that might mask their movement. When the alien commander reappeared, his stride was sharper, less measured than before. He spoke rapidly to his officers, and the translator caught fragments about unseen strikes and ground ghosts. The laughter was gone. Getting under his skin, Vance muttered. Kane didn't answer. His attention was on a new figure stepping out behind the commander. Taller, leaner, armor patterned with darker shades meant for concealment. This one moved differently, scanning with deliberate slowness, pausing often. An alien tracker, perhaps, or their equivalent of a marksman. Kane watched the way the figure's head tilted toward the hills, the long rifle slung across its back. The alien marksman gestured toward the western ridgeline. Their ridge and 2 squads began moving in that direction. They're coming for us, Vance said, eyes narrowing. Let them, Kane replied. The squads advanced cautiously, leapfrogging between cover. Kane let them get halfway up the slope before he moved. His first shot took the lead soldier of the left squad. The second cut down the right squad's point man. Confusion rippled instantly. They dropped low, returning fire at random. Plasma bolts scorched rock and dirt, the air filling with the smell of burned earth. Kane shifted again, each movement a calculated fraction, and began dismantling them one by one. Vance fed in positions without pause, her voice steady, unshaken. The alien marksman didn't fire immediately. Instead, he crouched low, eyes fixed on the hillside where Kane had last been. Kane could feel the attention, a pressure like the heat before lightning. He adjusted, letting the rain mask his movement, and sighted in on the marksman. The alien shifted as though sensing the aim, but hesitation cost him. Kane's round struck just above the chest plate, the force dropping him backward into the mud. For a heartbeat, the valley was still except for the rain. Then alien shouts rose, sharper and more urgent than before. The remaining soldiers pulled back, dragging their wounded. The squads vanished into the fog, leaving the slope empty again. Vance exhaled slowly. That'll make the report. Kane's expression didn't change. Won't be the last they send. Below, the commander stood rigid, staring toward the hills. Even from this distance, the tension in his posture was clear. He barked orders, and more drones lifted into the air, their search patterns doubling in intensity. Towers swiveled, sweeping the slopes with blinding light. But Kane and Vance were gone from that position, sliding quietly to a new vantage point deeper along the ridge. They settled in silence, the sound of the rain swallowing all else. Kane's mind traced the likely paths the aliens would take now. More trackers, more concentrated sweeps, perhaps artillery fire meant to flush them out. All of it would cost them time, energy, and trust in their own invulnerability. That trust was already cracking. Vance wiped water from her optic. You think they'll change their approach? They'll try, Kane said. Doesn't matter. Every time they look for us, they're not looking somewhere else. She nodded, understanding. The sniper's war was never about winning outright. It was about shaping the battlefield, bleeding the enemy's confidence until they made mistakes too big to recover from. Far below, the alien commander disappeared back into the command hub. The lights of the base glowed through the mist, cold and unwavering. Kane adjusted his rifle, settling into the earth once more. The rain showed no sign of stopping. Neither did he. The fog that had sheltered them for 2 days began to thin, unraveling in pale threads over the valley. Below, the alien base had grown into a fortress, its outer barricades fortified with energy fields that shimmered faintly in the morning light. Watchtowers rose higher, their rotating optics sweeping in tighter intervals. Drones now moved in trios instead of pairs, their search beams cutting through the mist like blades. Every adjustment spoke of a commander rattled, but also adapting. Kane knew the balance could tip either way. He lay prone in a new position along a spine of rock that jutted from the slope like the back of some buried creature. His ghillie suit blended perfectly into the weathered stone and tufts of mountain grass. Vance was 5 meters to his right, her profile almost invisible against the ridge, eyes fixed on her slate. She had spent the night tracking every new movement in the basin, building a map that pulsed with alien patrol routes and drone circuits. "They're doubling their tracker units," she said quietly, spreading them in an outward fan. "If they keep the pace, they'll cover the northern hills in 4 hours." Kane adjusted the angle of his scope, studying a pair of aliens moving at the edge of the base. These weren't standard infantry. Their armor was slimmer, with matte black plates designed to swallow light, and they carried elongated rifles Kane recognized as high-velocity kinetic weapons, the kind you issued to those who hunted other marksmen. "Not 4 hours," he said. "They'll make contact sooner." She glanced at him. "Then we move." He shook his head. "We make them commit. Every step they take uphill is a step they can't take back without looking weak." The wind shifted, carrying the faint hum of alien calms. Kane couldn't understand the words without the translator feed, but the cadence was enough. Short bursts, clipped orders, an urgency they hadn't shown before. Through his scope, he tracked the black-armored pair as they separated, one angling toward the western rise, the other threading through the low ground toward their current position. Kane let his breathing slow, counting the seconds between each movement. The alien in the low ground paused near a rock outcropping, scanning with a device that pulsed faint blue light. The sweep passed within meters of Kane's position before sliding past. Technology, for all its precision, still struggled with nature's chaos. The alien shifted again, and in that fraction of hesitation, Kane took the shot. The round punched through the narrow seam beneath the helmet's ridge, the body collapsing silently into the wet earth. Vance was already tracking the second hunter. He had stopped abruptly, head tilting as though sensing the shot's echo. He crouched low, scanning the ridge, rifle rising. Kane adjusted by a hair, accounting for the slope's drop and the faint crosswind. The second round hit just as the alien pulled his trigger, the plasma bolt searing harmlessly into stone a meter from Kane's head. Vance exhaled. "That's 2 less trackers." "They'll send more," Kane replied. The alien commander reacted faster this time. Patrols shifted immediately, drones swarming the area where the hunters had fallen. Searchlights cut swaths through the rain, bright and unyielding. Kane and Vance were already moving, low and silent, slipping deeper into the ridge network. Their new position overlooked a narrow ravine where runoff from the slopes collected into a sluggish stream. Kane had chosen it days ago as a natural choke point. Steep sides, limited cover, perfect for forcing an enemy into a line of fire. They waited. An hour passed. The rain eased, and with it came the faint sound of movement in the ravine. Alien boots clanged against stone, followed by the low hum of drone wings. Kane peered through the scope and saw them. A squad of 8, advancing in pairs, rifles sweeping. They moved cautiously, clearly expecting contact. Kane let the first pair pass beneath his position before firing. The shot struck the trailing soldier in the neck joint, the forward one spinning toward the sound. Vance took the second with a clean shot through the visor. The remaining 6 scattered for cover, firing into the slopes. Kane shifted positions without pause, forcing them to fire at where he had been instead of where he was. Another shot, another soldier down. The ravine became a trap. The aliens tried to push forward, but were funneled into the open by the steep rock faces. Vance's fire caught two more as they broke from cover. The last pair retreated, firing suppressive bursts that scorched the stone but hit nothing living. Kane didn't pursue. The retreat was the point. He wanted them to report back that the hills weren't just occupied. They were haunted. From the basin, alarms began to sound. The drones regrouped in a tight formation, fanning out in a sweeping arc toward the ravine. Kane and Vance melted back into the hillside, moving toward an overhang they had marked as a fallback position. The ledge provided cover from above and a concealed path to the next ridge. As they settled, Vance wiped rain from her optics. "They're bleeding resources chasing us." "That's the plan," Kane said. She studied him for a moment. "And when they stop chasing, then we choose where they go next." The words were calm, but Kane felt the weight behind them. Every engagement so far had been on his terms, but each success drew more attention. The alien commander was learning, adapting, narrowing the unknown. The moment would come when patience wasn't enough, when they would have to decide between disappearing entirely or striking so hard the enemy's momentum shattered. The evening brought no reprieve. Through the scope, Kane watched the commander inspecting the black-armored hunters' bodies. The alien's posture was rigid, controlled, but his movements were sharper now, less certain. He barked orders, and heavy weapons began moving toward the northern approach. Artillery platforms, sleek, angular machines, were positioned to target the hillsides. "They're going to flush us," Vance said. Kane adjusted his rifle, sighting along the edge of the basin. "Not if we bleed them first." They shifted position again, this time to a rise overlooking the artillery. The crews moved methodically, locking stabilizers into the mud. Kane picked the one giving orders, waited for the brief stillness between gestures, and fired. The shot dropped the alien instantly, and chaos followed. Crews scrambled for cover, leaving equipment half-assembled. Vance picked off another operator trying to bring a cannon online. Within minutes, the artillery was abandoned, drones swarming the area in frantic search patterns. By nightfall, the basin had the feel of a hive struck too many times, organized but humming with agitation. Kane and Vance withdrew to higher ground, their path concealed by the return of thick fog. They set up in silence, the ridge wind carrying the distant sounds of alien shouts and machinery. Vance broke the quiet first. "You ever think about after?" Kane didn't look away from the valley. "After what?" "All this. The fighting. The hiding." He considered it. "There's no after until they're gone. And they don't leave." The fog thickened, curling around them like a living thing. Somewhere below, the alien commander paced the edge of the basin, looking up at the dark hills. Kane watched him through the mist, the distance between them feeling smaller than it was. This was the shape of their war. Not armies clashing in open fields, but two minds locked across the gulf of terrain and silence. One would break. The other would remain unseen. The storm returned in the small hours, a violent curtain of rain that hammered the ridges and turned the valley floor into a mire of slick clay. Lightning flared along the horizon, casting the alien fortifications in fleeting white silhouettes. Kane lay beneath the overhang, every sense tuned to the change in the air. The basin was louder tonight, machines shifting, orders shouted in clipped bursts, the low drone of heavy engines warming for sustained operation. The enemy was preparing to move in force. Vance sat cross-legged beside her slate, the glow muted beneath a tarp. "Movement on all fronts," she said, scanning data as it streamed from her sensors. "They've shifted half their southern perimeter north. Looks like they're massing for a sweep." Kane studied the darkness below, watching the subtle changes in light as units repositioned. "How many?" "3 full companies minimum, plus drone support." She hesitated before adding, "If they close the circle, we'll be trapped in the valley." He shifted his rifle into position, sighting through the rain-smeared scope. "Then we don't let them close it." The alien commander emerged from the command hub, armored in fresh crimson-plated gear that gleamed under the floodlights. His posture radiated resolve, but his movements were quick and sharp. A man, or something like one, who had decided patience was no longer worth the cost. Around him, squads formed into staggered columns, each flanked by drones whose lights cut through the rain like spears. "They're coming to end it," Vance said. Kane nodded. "So are we." They moved quickly, keeping low, angling along the ridgeline until they reached a narrow saddle between two peaks. The terrain here was deceptive, flat at first glance, but riddled with depressions and jagged rock that created natural choke points. Kane had walked it twice in darkness, memorizing every line and shadow. In the rain, it became even more treacherous. "This is where we hold them," he said, setting his pack down and pulling out extra magazines. Vance mirrored him without question, her face a mask of concentration. The first alien scouts crested the lower slope 20 minutes later, their armor glistening under the lights of their drones. Kane waited, breath slow, heartbeat steady. When a lead soldier stepped into the open, Kane's rifle bucked once. The alien folded silently into the mud. Vance's shot came a half-second later, dropping the second before the squad could react. Shouts rose, plasma bolts slashing through the rain. Kane and Vance shifted, moving between firing points, never staying exposed for more than a heartbeat. The aliens pushed forward, each step met with precise, punishing fire. Lightning split the sky, and for an instant, Kane saw the commander at the rear, directing his forces up the slope. The image burned in his mind, the target, the fulcrum on which this battle could turn. But the distance was too great for a clean shot, and too many bodies moved between them. The alien advance slowed as the choke points claimed their toll. Kane used the terrain to force them into narrow lines, where each shot counted double. Vance covered the flanks, her fire methodical and unerring. Drones darted overhead, their search beams flashing across the rocks, but the ghillie suits and the rain swallowed Kane and Vance into the earth. Explosions bloomed along the ridge as alien mortars began to pound the hillside. Shards of stone clattered against Kane's helmet, one fragment cutting a line across his cheek. He ignored the sting, reloading with practice speed. "They're pushing right," Vance called, shifting to intercept. Her shot dropped another soldier mid-charge. "We can't hold forever." "Don't need forever," Kane said. Another wave surged up the slope, their movements more desperate now, the commander's voice cutting through the chaos in guttural bursts. Kane focused on the ones who moved fastest, the ones carrying heavier weapons. One by one, they fell, their advance stalling against the invisible line the snipers had drawn. A plasma bolt struck close, the heat washing over Kane's arm. He rolled, sighted, and returned fire, the target crumpling into the mud. His breathing was heavier now, each shot taken with deliberate care. Through the haze of rain and smoke, he saw movement, a gap in the alien formation. The commander was stepping forward, flanked by two guards, his gaze fixed on the ridgeline. Kane shifted, aligning his sights. The wind gusted, rain striking sideways. He adjusted for the drift, finger tightening on the trigger. The shot cracked through the storm. One of the guards fell instantly. The other lunged toward the commander, pushing him down. The round meant for the alien leader tore through the guard's armor, dropping him where he stood. The commander vanished into the chaos, retreating behind a wall of soldiers. Kane swore under his breath, but kept firing, each round slowing the alien retreat. The push had faltered. Below, the basin was a scene of disarray. Drones circling without coordination, squads breaking formation to pull back their wounded. The commander's voice still rang out, but it no longer carried the same command. There was urgency now, almost desperation. "They're falling back," Vance said, disbelief threading her voice. Kane lowered his rifle slightly, scanning the retreat. "Not far enough. They'll regroup." He watched as the alien forces withdrew to the edge of the basin, dragging equipment and leaving behind scorched ground and silent bodies. The rain washed over everything, muting the battlefield into shades of gray. When the last drone vanished into the mist, Kane and Vance stayed prone, waiting. The valley felt different now, not safe, never safe but lighter somehow, as though the weight pressing down had shifted. You think that was it? Vance asked finally. Kane shook his head. That was a warning. For them, and for us. They moved only when the light began to fade, slipping back into the deeper ridges where even the drone's beams couldn't reach. Kane's mind replayed the moment when the commander had been in his sights, the near miss that could have ended it all. That image would stay with him, sharpening into resolve. They reached their fallback position, a shallow cave concealed by a curtain of vines. Inside, the air was still, the damp walls smelling of stone and moss. Vance set her rifle down carefully, leaning back against the wall. We held, she said. For now, Kane replied, checking the action on his rifle. He worked in silence for a moment before adding, next time we finish it. Outside, the storm eased, the rain thinning to a steady whisper. Somewhere beyond the hills, the alien commander was planning his next move, just as Kane was planning his. The war was far from over, but in the valley tonight, the ghosts in the mud had won.